Earlier today, the Home Secretary confirmed that the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre has increased the threat level in the United Kingdom from substantial to severe. This is the first time in 3 years that the threat to our country has been at this level.
Peter Brooks, former CIA officer, joins us now. I'm also here with Mike O'Rourke, Todd Schoenberger, and Captain Pete Hegseth is standing by with reaction to the UK raising its terror threat to the second highest level. You just heard from David Cameron speaking to the fact that they are now saying that a terror attack is highly likely. The Pentagon, by the way, is not commenting on this. They are deferring to Homeland Security. I want to bring in first Peter Brooks, former CIA officer. Peter, what would it take? What does the UK need to know to raise the terror level, the terror threat level, to the second highest level? They must have some pretty serious intelligence that a terror attack is imminent.
Yeah, they must be very concerned. They're taking intelligence from all the sources possible, human intelligence, imagery intelligence, signals intelligence, and putting it all together. And then they have this team that looks at that. And it must be very serious. They're obviously not going to share a lot with us because they don't want to give away sources and methods or tip off the bad guys that we know what they're up to. But I would think that the Prime Minister would take a step like this wouldn't take a step like this without a lot of consideration for the potential reverberations throughout society and the markets, and as well as the security elements. So it's a very, very thoughtful and insightful and well thought out step by the Prime Minister.
All right, Peter Brooks, thank you for joining us. We're going to let you go.
Thank you for having me.
I want to get to Pete Hegseth on this. Thanks for running back to the studio. We had you on at the top of the hour talking about the best way to target ISIS. And from a guy with your experience, you've been on the ground, Iraq, Afghanistan. It was to attack them financially. David Cameron did make some comments to that point that I want to run by you. He said that these extremists are funded by those far away from the battlefield. I'm not sure what to make of that.
Well, it's a combination of both, and I think KT was right on it earlier when she said that early on a lot of their seed funding, if you will, came from oil-rich countries and folks who have lots of money and believe in the ideology and the cause. More recently, this summer, they've been able to build their own infrastructure internally to sustain their own economy and their own funding stream, which is how you take an organization from just a terrorist organization to a sort of quasi-nation state, which is exactly what they want to do.
What struck you from the Prime Minister's words?
Boy, the clarity, the leadership. And I'm stealing a phrase from as we were chatting. It is the tale of two press conferences. It is the tale of yesterday and then clear leadership today.
Comparing to the President Obama speaking
absolutely.
yesterday.
He talked about Islamism. He talked about what the nature of this terrorist threat is. He talked about a generational struggle. You could hear the urgency in his voice. And that's because, this is a very clear and present danger. I said existentially, it's not a threat. It's not an existential threat to the United States this morning. It is to the UK. It is to a country where and I mentioned this morning, and it's an important fact to sort of let sink in. There are more Muslims from the UK fighting for ISIS than there are Muslims in the UK fighting in the British Army, which is a very telling and I think chilling statistic for folks there who want to believe they're a melting pot. And right now there's been a ghettoization in the Muslim community in the UK that's created a festering that could manifest itself now, it appears, in a very direct attack.
You make the comparison to President Obama's speech yesterday, which our financial guys have pointed out did take place after the market closed. This during market hours, which has turned us into negative territory, the Dow down 41 points. You compare David Cameron's tone and clarity to the president's speech yesterday. We have a quick bite of the president speaking yesterday evening. Here it is. Listen.
I don't want to put the cart before the horse. We don't have a strategy yet. I think what I've seen in some of the news reports suggests that folks are getting a little further ahead of where we're at than we currently are. And I think that's not just my assessment, but the assessment of our military as well.
Don't have a strategy yet. That threw a lot of people for a loop there.
I mean, whether it's ISIS or whether it's Ukraine, to not have strategies, like how bad do things have to get to decide we have to have a strategy? And that should be really disconcerting to the American people. And obviously, and that's why we think David Cameron came out as strong as he did. Yeah,
Todd, I want to compare this to now a bite from David Cameron just moments ago.
This threat cannot be solved simply by dealing with the perceived grievances over Western foreign policy. Nor can it be dealt with by addressing poverty, dictatorship or instability in the region as important as these things are. The root cause of this threat to our security is quite clear. It is a poisonous ideology of Islamist extremism that is condemned by all faiths and by all faith leaders.
As Captain Hegseth just pointed out, a bit more clarity and you get a sense of more direction coming from the Prime Minister.
That's right. President Obama seems to be trying to lead from behind, and that's one thing that we've been constantly hearing over the last 6 years. And here you have Cameron that's coming out with very direct, detailed information, and he's obviously alarming the citizens of who he's governing. Here's the thing, though. When you start thinking about, try to put this in financial terms, and it's just what I know, you think about that one anchor investor with any type of an investment. It looks like Cameron's going to be that anchor investor, because when you start thinking of our NATO alliance, we really need somebody that's going to be out there in front, set the tone, set the pace, and also provide that leadership.
Rich Edson, something else that struck me from Prime Minister Cameron's words is that he expects this threat to go on for years.
Right, and I think that that's an expectation that folks in Washington have as well. Maybe the administration isn't as forthcoming with that fact. What still is missing, I think, from what we heard from David Cameron and what we heard from President Obama is specifically what are the next steps. What the president has discussed is protecting U.S. personnel in Iraq, State Department folks, our embassies in Iraq. Beyond that, though, as for an expansion of how exactly the U.S. and our allies are going to specifically deal militarily with the threat and the growing threat that's going on in the Middle East, whether or not we will conduct any type of airstrikes or activity in Syria, that's something that will be discussed, according to the White House, next week at the NATO summit. But even from what we heard from David Cameron today, the international strategy beyond, specifically, what will the U.S. and U.K. do beyond this? We've not heard that from either government yet, and I think even though the president came out yesterday with an attempt to clarify what the U.S. is doing, perhaps what we'll do, we know as much about our strategy today than we did at the same time yesterday.
Rich, I want to go to Captain Pete Hegseth sitting here with me right now, because there was a very clear question coming from someone to Prime Minister Cameron about if the threat is so big, UK is raising their threat level to the second highest possible. If the threat is so big, why are there not boots? Why are they not on the ground fighting as far as British soldiers?
That is the elephant in the room. Everyone talks about this immediate and existential threat, but it's happening in Iraq, right? Now, I appreciated what David Cameron said when he said Iraq didn't cause Islamic extremism. This is something before the Iraq War. That's an important point to litigate, because in the UK, Iraq is a dirty, dirty word. The question about boots on the ground is essential, because everyone wants to talk about a comprehensive strategy. The president talks about it. David Cameron talks about it. Political, military, diplomatic.
We want one.
We all want that, and we want that strategy. A key part of a comprehensive strategy that defeats a radical terrorist army is boots and guns. No one wants to say that or talk about it, but you got to kill bad guys if you want to infuse a comprehensive strategy. He doesn't want to say it. The president doesn't want to say it. And the reality is the UK doesn't have the military that's capable to sustain it. Only one country in the world does. The Western world has outsourced their military power to the United States of America. If somebody's going to do something about it, it's going to be us.
You know, he really didn't answer the question. He did go on about several things, but never really specifically targeted that question in his answer. I want to get to Phil.